I eat clean, I cut carbs. I even downloaded a calorie tracking app, and my stomach still looks like I'm smuggling a cantaloupe under my shirt. At this point, my belly fat has its own lease agreement and zero intention of moving out. But the reason it won't budge has nothing to do with discipline. That fat is biologically wired to stay, and it's using your own stress hormones as the landlord. Visceral fat, the deep fat packed around your organs, is not the same as the fat on your arms or thighs. Under a microscope, it looks different, behaves differently, and it is loaded with cortisol receptors. Think of those receptors like high-powered antennas. While the rest of your body barely registers a low-level stress signal, your belly fat picks it up, cranks the volume, and expands. When cortisol hits those receptors, it activates an enzyme called 11-beta-HSD1, which converts inactive cortisol into its active form directly inside the fat tissue. Your belly fat can manufacture its own private cortisol environment, completely independent of what's circulating in your bloodstream. Your stress levels could look perfectly normal on a lab panel, but meanwhile, your visceral fat is quietly running its own operation in the background. That's what makes the feedback loop so vicious. As the visceral fat expands, it releases inflammatory proteins called cytokines. Those cytokines travel to your adrenal glands and trigger more cortisol production. The fat is actively recruiting the hormone that feeds it. Every crash diet, every punishing workout, and every skipped meal you throw at it only amplifies the signal. The harder you fight it the wrong way, the harder it fights back. Stay with me, because once you see what's actually triggering that signal, you won't be able to unsee it. The treadmill is lying to your face. I used to think sweating through a 45-minute jog every morning was basically a superpower. I was moving, I was breathing hard, I was virtue signaling to every person in the neighborhood with my little armband and my determined face. The only problem was my waistline didn't get the memo. Moderate intensity cardio, the kind where you're moving fast enough to feel it, but slow enough to keep going for an hour, triggers a sustained cortisol release. Evolutionarily, humans sprinted to chase prey or escape something with teeth. They walked to forage. They did not jog at a medium pace for an hour every day, and your stress system was never built for it. When you do this daily without adequate recovery, cortisol stays chronically elevated, and chronically elevated cortisol has a very specific target for fat storage, the visceral area. So while you think you're shrinking, your body is redirecting fat deposits exactly where you don't want them. It gets worse. Cortisol breaks down muscle tissue to convert it into glucose for fuel. As you lose muscle mass, your resting metabolic rate drops. You burn fewer calories sitting still. The scale might tick downward, but your body composition is getting softer, your metabolism is getting slower, and your belly fat is getting a preferential deposit every time cortisol spikes. You're literally burning your engine to store more fuel. The fix is not doing less and feeling guilty about it. It's understanding which type of movement sends a safety signal to your nervous system instead of a threat signal. And the answer is going to feel almost too easy when you finally see it. Your liver is a sugar factory running the night shift. I went full keto. No bread, no pasta, no joy at dinner. My carb intake was basically zero, and I was fully convinced my insulin was so low it had taken a vacation. Then I got my blood work back, and my fasting glucose looked like I'd been eating donuts for breakfast. Most people believe insulin is only a food problem. Eat sugar, spike insulin, store fat. Stop eating sugar, insulin drops, burn fat. Except your liver didn't agree to those terms. When cortisol surges, it sends a direct signal to the liver. Emergency, we need fuel now. The liver responds by manufacturing glucose from amino acids and stored tissue through a process called gluconeogenesis, literally the creation of new sugar. No carbohydrates required. Your body generates its own glucose supply completely independent of what you ate. So you wake up after a 12-hour fast, stressed about work, running on 4 hours of sleep, and your cortisol is already climbing before your feet hit the floor. Your liver dumps a fresh wave of glucose into your bloodstream to fuel a fight that isn't actually happening. Your pancreas senses the rising blood sugar and releases insulin to manage it. Now you have high cortisol and high insulin simultaneously, while fasting, and insulin is the master switch that locks the door on fat burning. Your fat stores stay. Your body runs on sugar it manufactured itself, and you're standing in your kitchen eating eggs and avocado wondering why nothing is working. Attacking cortisol is not optional. It is the entire game. And one of the biggest cortisol drivers hiding inside what looks like a perfectly healthy routine is something almost everyone in their 40s and 50s is doing every single morning without thinking twice. The 3 a.m. alarm nobody set. My wife thinks I've lost my mind because I bolt awake at 3 a.m. like someone just kicked in the front door, heart pounding, brain already drafting tomorrow's to-do list like it's been holding a clipboard all night waiting for this moment. Turns out, it has nothing to do with stress or a bad mattress. It's a metabolic event, and it's quietly destroying your waistline every single night it happens. While you sleep, blood sugar naturally declines. In a metabolically flexible person, that drop is gradual, and the body manages it without drama. But when cortisol is chronically elevated and metabolic flexibility is poor, blood sugar falls too fast. Your brain runs almost exclusively on glucose, and when it senses a shortage, it treats it like a life-threatening emergency. Your adrenal glands fire off adrenaline and cortisol to force the liver to dump glucose and stabilize levels. That adrenaline surge is what snaps you awake. It's not because you're a light sleeper. Your body just pulled a full emergency response because it thought it was running out of fuel in the middle of your sleep cycle. Two things go wrong simultaneously. You miss the deep delta wave sleep phases where growth hormone releases in its largest natural pulse of the night. Growth hormone is your primary fat-burning and muscle-preserving hormone, and without that nightly release, visceral fat accumulates faster. On top of that, you spend hours soaking in cortisol and insulin while your body should be in full repair mode. You wake up puffy, foggy, and inflamed, with your visceral fat storage running at full capacity. Most people never connect the 3 a.m. wake-up to their waistline. The fix is something no fitness influencer has ever suggested before bed. You're fasting wrong, and your body knows it. I did a 20-hour fast like a champion. Skipped breakfast, skipped lunch, drank my black coffee like a serious person who definitely has their life together. By hour 18, my hands were cold. My brain felt like mush, and I was snapping at my kids over nothing. But I pushed through because that's what discipline looks like, right? Except my body wasn't reading it as discipline. It was reading it as a famine. Fasting is one of the most powerful tools available for lowering insulin, triggering cellular repair, and improving metabolic health. The research on this is solid. But fasting is a stressor, a controlled, productive one when the conditions are right, and a metabolic disaster when they aren't. When you layer a 20-hour fast on top of poor sleep, a high-pressure job, and a body already running on elevated cortisol, you don't get the clean hormonal reset fasting promises. Your body receives one message: resources are gone and the threat is still here. That combination tells your thyroid to downregulate, your energy to drop, and your body to hold on to every calorie it can find, starting with visceral fat, which it treats as the last emergency reserve. Cortisol then triggers gluconeogenesis, the same liver glucose dump covered earlier, which spikes insulin. Now you're fasting, stressed, and insulin is elevated anyway. You've canceled out the entire benefit of the fast while also making yourself miserable. The goal of fasting is to lower insulin long enough for your body to start using stored fat as fuel. But if the stress load of the fast pushes cortisol high enough to manufacture its own glucose, you've crossed the line from fasting into starving. Your body doesn't reward that, it punishes it. What you eat when you break the fast determines whether the whole strategy works or collapses. The post-meal walk that outperforms metformin. I used to finish dinner and immediately migrate to the couch like a sea lion finding its rock, horizontal within 4 minutes, remote in hand, fully committed to doing absolutely nothing. Turns out that window right after eating is one of the most metabolically important 15 minutes of your entire day, and I was spending it watching television and ignoring my pancreas. When you eat, blood glucose rises, and your pancreas releases insulin to manage it. The bigger the spike, the more insulin gets dumped, and the more your body shifts into fat storage mode. Most people try to control this through food choices alone, eating less, cutting carbs, avoiding sugar. But there is a mechanical shortcut that bypasses the insulin spike almost entirely, and it requires nothing but your legs. Skeletal muscle has a unique backdoor glucose transporter called GLUT4. Under normal circumstances, insulin acts as the key that unlocks GLUT4 and allows muscle cells to pull sugar out of the bloodstream. But when a muscle physically contracts, GLUT4 activates on its own, no insulin required. The muscle becomes a direct glucose sink, draining sugar from your blood through movement alone. A brisk 10 to 15 minute walk immediately after eating activates this mechanism across your largest muscle groups. Studies have shown this approach lowers post-meal blood glucose as effectively as metformin in some populations, without the prescription, without the side effects, and without a single dietary change. Lower post-meal glucose means a smaller insulin response, less fat storage signaling, and less cortisol burden on the system. This one habit, done consistently after each meal, compounds into a dramatically different hormonal environment over weeks. Your insulin sensitivity improves, your cortisol load drops, and your body spends more time mobilizing fat between meals. It costs 15 minutes, 3 times a day, and it works while you're still digesting the food that caused the problem. What happens overnight is an entirely different battle, and most people are losing it in their sleep. The honey trick. That sounds insane until you try it. My doctor would probably look at me sideways if I told him my pre-bed routine involves eating honey straight off a spoon, like a bear who just found a hive. It sounds like the opposite of everything you've been told about fat loss. No eating after 7 p.m. Keep insulin low overnight. Don't touch sugar before bed. All reasonable advice. Until your 3 a.m. wake-up problem is actually a blood sugar crash, and staying fully fasted is the exact thing triggering it. If you're someone who wakes up in the middle of the night wired and alert, your liver is running out of glycogen, its stored glucose reserve, and panicking. The adrenaline that wakes you up is the alarm system, not the problem. The problem is the empty tank that triggered it. The fix is a strategic safety anchor before sleep. 1 teaspoon of raw honey and a small pinch of high-quality sea salt taken about 30 minutes before bed. The honey provides a slow, steady trickle of fructose that the liver converts directly into glycogen, topping off the tank just enough that the brain doesn't register a shortage at 2 or 3 a.m. The salt supports adrenal function and helps regulate fluid balance, which lowers the threshold for adrenaline release overnight. By preventing the blood sugar crash, you prevent the cortisol and adrenaline spike. You stay asleep, and staying asleep is where the real work happens. Deep delta wave sleep is when growth hormone peaks, cortisol hits its lowest point of the day, and your body shifts fully into repair and mobilization mode. You are trading 1 teaspoon of honey for 8 hours of optimal hormonal output. One section left, and it might be the most unexpected one in this entire video. The hormone nobody talks about in the fat loss space. Nobody in the fitness industry is going to sell you this one because there's no supplement version of it, no 30-day program built around it, and no way to put it in a shaker bottle. It costs absolutely nothing, and it is the most direct chemical antidote to the cortisol feedback loop that has been running your belly fat operation this entire time. The hormone is oxytocin. Cortisol and oxytocin operate on a biological seesaw. When one goes up, the other is forced down. They share opposing pathways in the hypothalamus, the region of your brain that controls your entire hormonal environment. When oxytocin rises, your hypothalamus suppresses cortisol output. Oxytocin is triggered by physical touch, genuine social connection, and what researchers call heartfelt positive emotion, a sustained feeling of warmth that your nervous system registers as real safety. Not thinking about gratitude, actually feeling it, even briefly. When you generate that feeling with intention, focusing on something or someone that produces genuine warmth, your heart rate variability shifts, your parasympathetic nervous system activates, and the axis driving your cortisol production begins to quiet down. Doing this for 60 seconds before a meal measurably improves insulin response and digestion. Doing it before bed improves how fast you fall asleep and lowers overnight cortisol levels. Your body cannot distinguish between a real threat and a perceived one, but it also cannot distinguish between real safety and a deliberately generated feeling of it. You can manually override the stress system using nothing but your own mind. Visceral fat is a symptom of a body that believes it is under siege. The fastest way to drain it is to convince your body the war is finally over. If your 40s or 50s have felt like your metabolism declared war on you without warning, you now have the full picture of why and exactly what to do about it. If this changed how you think about belly fat, subscribe and hit the like button. There's a lot more coming that your doctor probably hasn't mentioned yet.